Good morning, everyone. It is Friday morning, 10 a.m., January 3rd, 10 a.m. Eastern, I should say, and I am here for yet another Free Advice Friday. I love hanging out with you guys on Friday morning and answering your questions. We've got some great questions that were emailed in earlier this week, and some of them I don't want to answer. So I have asked my friend, my business partner, man that I respect, his business acumen and his ability to communicate both marketing but also business ideas are without parallel. And so I would like to welcome my friend Daniel Hall, who's here today on Free Advice Friday to answer all of our questions. How are you this morning, Daniel?
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. And good morning to everyone watching.
Daniel, where are you calling in from this morning?
My office here in Austin, Texas.
Got it. Got it. All right. So it's a little earlier there than it is here. Daniel, I know you've seen these Free Advice Fridays, but I just want to remind you and everyone else that we broadcast live. But if you're watching this on a replay, you can join us live every Friday by going to amysadvice.com. If you go to amysadvice.com, click on the big red button, it will allow you to register to join us here live. And by doing so, the questions that are asked live, they get precedence. They're the ones that we answer first. You can always email me as well at amy@newshelves.com ahead of time. I do answer those questions as well. And we will answer you guys live anytime we can. Let's see. Oh, hi, Anna. Thank you for the Happy New Year. A Happy New Year to you as well. Wendy, it's always great to see you. And for the rest of you, let's get started. All right, the first question we have this morning that isn't in the Q&A box, but that came in from an email, was about MailChimp. A lot of us, me included, use MailChimp for our email lists and for our newsletters. I used MailChimp because a few years ago when I got started, it was the simplest and easiest thing to do. I'm not the most technologically savvy. I'm certainly no designer. And I loved how easy it was to use their templates. But their terms are changing. They're changing dramatically. They are raising their prices, but they're also counting if you've got names on your list in two different lists, or if you've archived a name, they're still counting that towards your count. Prices are going up dramatically. However, at the same time, I have found it's worth it to stay with MailChimp because the services and what they're offering are also going up dramatically. Landing pages and all sorts of things they didn't offer a few years ago. It makes sense for me, but I know, Daniel, you use Aweber for your mailing, don't you?
Actually, I have three services. Aweber is one of them.
Well, I wanted to ask, we've got a question here, whether or not this particular author should stick with MailChimp. Now, she only has 3,000 people on her list. I have 10,000, but Daniel, how many people are on your list?
Well, actually, I don't know the exact count because, as I say, I have three list, and
it's a lot
there is
more than
some overlap.
10,000 though.
I don't know, probably 50,000, 60,000 people.
Yes. So, Daniel, I'm curious, what are the services you use that you like?
Well, that's different. Those are different questions. So I use, as you say, Aweber, which is probably the best when it comes to deliverability. And when you are evaluating a email service, then deliverability is the key, because you don't want to have 3,000 names and a service that only was able to deliver 1,000 of those 3,000, for example. So email deliverability is really good with Aweber, or relatively good for industry standards. And so I like Aweber probably the best. Then I have a older service. It was actually the one I kind of started with. It was it's called One Shopping Cart, and I initially started my list there, and that, I don't know, has probably 16,000 people on it right now. And then I also have iContact as my third service. I think there's probably 7,000 or 8,000 people there. By far the largest list is on Aweber, but those are the three services that I use, and I generally mail them every day or almost every day.
That's terrific. That's terrific. All right, guys. So there you have it. I contact AWeber. I've heard a lot of good things about AWeber, and I may have to make that jump myself eventually. I use MailChimp. I'm not as familiar with the One Shop. Is it called One Shop?
One shopping cart.
One shopping cart, but I know that Sandra Beckwith also uses that, and so guys, just do your research, keep it within your budget. But Daniel's right. The most important thing is that whatever service you use, that the emails actually get out in a timely and regular manner. I was on the phone with an author. Her name is Pat. I won't use her last name, but I was on the phone with her yesterday, and she wants to start doing a newsletter. And I asked her how often. She said maybe she'd do 3 a year. Well, guys, that's not a newsletter. And that's great. Those are, 3 different announcements for 3 different things she wants to do. That's not an email list. That's not a newsletter. When you're going to create an email plan, and Daniel is far better at this than I am, but one of the things that he's taught me is that consistency and constant contact, and not to make a joke about that name, but constant contact is important. I used to email people once or twice a month, and he quickly informed me that they were getting lost. Nobody even saw my emails, and he was right. I will tell you that I do not mail as often as Daniel does, but my list is different from his. My offerings are different from his, but I still mail almost every day. And you have to find your own style. You have to find what you're comfortable with. But I will tell you that one of the things that I've learned from Daniel is that stepping outside my comfort zone, going past what I thought was appropriate, made a huge difference for my followers. See, I was raised in New England by parents who, wouldn't smile if their life depended on it. We're a very careful people. And we're not supposed to bother anyone for any reason. And I consider these emails a bother. What I've learned over the last few years from Daniel is that my emails are helpful. They're of service. And if I'm not connecting with people on a regular basis, I can't help them. And if they don't want to get that many emails, they'll let me know. They can unsubscribe. They can, my email service, you can just get a weekly digest. You don't have to get them every day. You can choose how my emails come in. And the best services do allow for that function. So I would suggest that 3 emails a year, nowhere near enough. And that 1 a month is nowhere near enough. The other thing I want to mention to you guys, if you're going to do an email program, is that you create an identity and a mission statement for your mailings. Daniel's mission for his mailings, especially the ones that come out with his programs where he's helping bring other people's services to his list, his mission is so clear. When you see his emails, he's trying to educate people and to give people services that they would not find otherwise. My mission for my newsletter is to educate on the publishing industry. This author I was speaking to yesterday, Pat, her mission was to tell people about her books. I would argue that telling people about your books is not the best mission you could come up with. If this particular author just wants to tell people about her books, that's not helpful. It's not thinking about what your readers need. It's thinking more about what you want to tell them. So while I would love it if you guys signed in every week to listen to me sing the alphabet because I think I got a pretty voice, that's not helping you. So I suggested that this author go back to the drawing board, create a mission statement where she takes the themes of her book, which is feminism, women in business. It's these novels about high-powered female CEOs, and actually start offering advice for women in business. Create a theme and a mission for your newsletter. You will get so much further. Anything you want to add, Daniel, before we move on to the next question?
Well, yes, to sort of finer points. First on the message, that the idea is that you actually determine who you wish to serve, and then craft a mission statement that is in accord with that, with helping that particular demographic. So it's not, you're not trying to serve the entire world, essentially, not the entire population. It's a really kind of a segmented population that you're trying to reach, or that you actually will reach in any appreciable way. So that's really, really important that that you understand as you come up with your own mission statement. And the second thing that I just want folks to really understand, because this is a crucial point, especially with authors that I've worked with in the last decade. They are like a lot of folks had Amy's basic mindset. Well, my email is bothering people. It's not, it's not polite or whatever. Let me tell you that you train your audience on how they interact with you. Okay, so you are in control. You are in the driver's seat. Will you run off some people? Probably. Does it really matter? Probably not, because you will resonate with those people that like the way you do things, like the way you approach problems, like the way you approach solutions, and they will stick with you. And that's the other thing, is that some people will come onto your list and then off of your list, and then back onto your list and then off your list, and on your list and off your list. And that's cool too. So I guess what I'm saying is, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of, if your emails are truly of service, and that is your and that is your mission for the demographic that you have defined, then just go with it, stick with it, and you will see that over time you will get more and more engagement, more and more profitable, and you will be of a greater service to the community that you are endeavoring to serve. So those are the sort of mindset shifts that I try to get across to especially authors that are just getting started with their email list. You train the list how you want them to react, not the other way around. Okay, so that's really important.
Great advice. Now, Wendy, I see your question about cover, and I want to dig into it, but there's one or two follow-up questions for Daniel here about mailing lists. So, Wendy, I'm with you. Just give us one more second. Sonia's asking about using a mailing list to send out press releases to the media. Now, I have a strong opinion about this. I believe that you let the people who have the expertise in a particular area do what they do best. I use a company called 24/7 to release my press releases. Daniel, you introduced me to Chris. What's the name of that?
Chris Munch.
Yes. And I don't remember the name of his company, but there are some great, what Chris Munch, I'm sure if you guys Google it, you can get it. I had great luck with them as well. But I use press release services to send out press releases because they have a much broader reach. I will also tell you that my emails going into the media probably have about as much chance of reaching the people I need them to as I do reaching the Queen of England. You want to let people who have the relationships, who already have the names and the correct contacts, do that. It's not very expensive in this day and age. You can send out a press release now for under $100 and reach thousands. You can get hundreds of great logos with one good press release if it's written properly and if it's got the right focus. So Sonia, I'm not saying not to send out to your media list, but I'm saying that I believe you'll have much better chance if you use the right service.
Well, may I just interject here?
Or disagree.
As a general rule, when dealing with the media, okay, I guess let's step back just a second and think about, what is your intent behind your press release? That's basically step one. What do you intend to do with a press release? If that intent is to gin up some interest in you or your company being covered, or that press release actually being syndicated by a particular publication, or to generate interest in maybe doing a feature article on you, then it is far better if that is in fact your intent, it is far better to cherry pick by design, because you have a reason, specific journalists, and do it one-to-one, not in a broadcast fashion. Okay. Second is I don't think I've ever sent, just so you understand, I don't think I've ever sent a press release to my entire list or to an entire media list at all. What I have done is exactly what Amy has said, use a press release service, which then gets syndicated to various newspapers and affiliate television, news services, etc., specifically for the authority of that and for SEO or search engine optimization purposes. Generally speaking, press releases just sent out willy-nilly through these services are good for SEO or search engine optimization purposes, but for the most part, they do not generate clicks. I mean, they might from time to time, depending on the service, but that's not the major play. The major play is, hey, you send out a press release. It appears in, I don't know, the Chicago Sun-Times, and you and basically on the Chicago Sun-Times website. Then you link back, and then you tell everyone on Twitter and all your Facebook followers and all that. Oh, hey, I'm on the the Chicago Sun-Times, for example. That's a really, really great way to use a press release service that lets other people know that you have that authority, but it's not going to necessarily generate the type of interest in them reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, can I do a feature article on you?" You've got to do that one-to-one, in my opinion.
Because that is not a press release. Now, Sonia, I know you know this, but for those of you who are listening, and I want to say hi to Kate and Jane and all of you on Facebook. I saw you. Thank you, guys. But for those of you who are listening who may or may not know, a press release announces something. What Daniel, when he was suggesting that you do a one-focused, that is a press pitch. You are pitching them something. And you never want to do that as a mass scattershot email. You need to do those one time. So make sure you're using your press release. I hate air quotes. You guys, I can't believe I did air quotes in front of you again. But make sure you're using your press release simply to announce something, to make the press aware that something's happening. A press pitch is something very different. And you wouldn't use your mailing list for that anyway, because you want to make sure that you do it one at a time. It's the respect. If you want to get an interview, well, then you should pitch it one at a time. Daniel, we have a question specifically for you from Stephan. Stephan is here every Friday. He has the best questions, but he is a little more like you than like me. And last week he asked this question, and this is why I said I was going to get you on this week, because I don't know anywhere near as much as you do. He wants to pre-sell a course. He's very interested in Stephan has written a book about paying for college. It's a fantastic, well-received book about paying for college, but he's not getting the lift outside of the book industry that he wants. He wants to turn it into a course. He's previously attempted to make a course, but no one bought it. He wants to try again, but he's a little nervous. I mean, he's not failed, but it already hasn't worked once. And it's not that the content isn't great, but he wants to talk about what you do when you want to pre-sell a course. He knows the course is good, but he's interested in how to market it.
Right. So great question. And I commend you for, first off, trying to bridge the gap between book and course, because there is definitely an aperture in the market. There are people that buy your book that want more from you. And if you don't have a course, then they can't get more from you. So good job on that. So how I would approach this problem is, first off, I might go back depending on the nature and the subject matter of your first course, I may go back and re-examine, because I'm a big believer in repackaging and repurposing the same content so that you're not replowing the same ground that you've plowed before, right? And so what I might do is I would identify those people. This is a really, really high-level strategy that, if you're willing to do it, really has helped build my own business. If I were to like point to the linchpin, this one thing that I just did over and over and over again, it was this: is I went out and I identified other people in my niche, or other people who had audiences. They already had audiences who loved them, respected them, responded to them. And I knew that their audience would, or at least a portion of their audience, would be interested in what I was doing, okay? So, and then the next thing that I did was I would approach that, let's call him an influencer, and I would say, hey, would you like to do a guest module in my course on your subject matter? And we'll promote you, and you promote your, whatever it is that you're doing. And invariably, when you ask people, somebody who is knowledgeable, who is a savvy marketer, when you give them an opportunity to introduce themselves to new audiences, they always say yes, or almost always say yes. I mean, case in point, I am here today for the very first time, so that I could be introduced to you, right? So this is the same thing. And what you do once you reach out to these people, because it is an easy yes for them to say, yes, I'll do that. That's the first yes. You're not asking them for anything else but that. You get on, you do a Google Hangout with them, you interview them a little bit, you plop them into your course, and you do this with 3 or 4 or 5 other influencers in your niche, or those people that can reach an audience that would be interested in whatever your course is. And then once you've done that, you go back to these 4 or 5 people and say, hey, look, I'd like to create a special offer just for your community. Would you be interested in that? And not only that, but I will pay you 75% or even 100% of the royalties, or of the commission for doing this to your list, as long as I get to keep the names, right? The buyer names. That is such a simple way to co-opt somebody else's audience, right? In a very, very smart way, where they feel like that you're not going to them cap in hand. I don't know you. We haven't worked together. I don't know you from Adam, but yet please do this thing for me. That's not the case here. You've already reached out to them. You've already created a bond or relationship and showed them that you are there to promote them, to help them, to build their business, to support them in their business. So now it's just it's now reciprocal, right? Now it comes back. Now, will every one of them do that? No, they won't. But will a significant number? Yes, there will be a significant number of people that will find a way to help you because you have first reached out and helped them. If you want to know how to pre-sell a course, that is precisely how to do it.
Wow. All right, guys. And that is from the man who literally taught me from the ground up how to do this. And I just want to mention to you guys that any of you, no matter what kind of book you have, if you have a children's book, if you have a novel, if you're a nonfiction expert like Stephan, whomever you are, any of you can start moving your readership, your community away from your books and onto video or podcasts or into your newsletter. There are so many ways that people want to interact with you. a few months ago, Daniel really started digging into a YouTube channel. Now, I've been working my YouTube channel for a year. Daniel's been working it for weeks. Daniel's YouTube subscriptions now is 10 times what mine is, because the man knows his best. I mean, when you go to his YouTube channel, Daniel, now I know my YouTube channel is, you know, it's just filled with my Free Advice Fridays and stuff. But your YouTube channel has tons of educational and how-to videos, correct?
Yes, and we're adding more. As a matter of fact, I just hired a videographer to come in, and so production quality is going to be going way, way up. Matter of fact, I just bought this fancy new Canon right here.
Well, but that is in the future. Daniel simply sat in front of his computer for
this
guys,
one right here, right here.
Mm-hmm. I recommend you go to youtube.com, and is it /Daniel Hall or is it /real fast?
Well, if you go to danielhallwebinars.com/YT digital, danielhallwebinars.com/YT digital, there is a course there on creating digital products. So if you're interested in creating digital products, there's a couple free videos there on how to do so with basically free software. And there you go. And if you like that type of content, then make sure to subscribe and hit the little bell notification so that when I put out a new video, and I'm going to be putting out dozens more very soon.
Daniel, what's that URL again? I want to drop it in the chat box.
It is Daniel Hall Webinars. Let me just make sure that I've got that right. I believe it is, yeah.
See, guys, you don't have to be completely, you can do video and streaming any way you want, and it still works. Daniel uses Aweber, I use MailChimp. I use Zoom, he uses GoToMeeting. Daniel and I don't need to agree on how to do it. What's important is we both do it.
Exactly.
Doing it is enough.
So let me throw the link into the chat here on Zoom.
Well, that's great.
Yeah, so it's danielhallwebinars.com/YT digital. We'll take you to that playlist anyway.
Terrific.
Yeah.
And I am dropping it into the Facebook chat so that you guys have it there as well. All right. We've got another question. Daniel, this one I think is a little bit more in my wheelhouse, but I'd love it if you want to weigh in.
Okay.
Wendy is talking about covers. She has a 5.5 by 8.5 new edition coming out. She's got a new cover. And Wendy is doing what I've asked everyone to do, to go to the best sellers. You know how important I think it is to take a look at what's actually selling. And Wendy has done that. She has gone to the Amazon bestsellers. She's gone to a couple different bestseller lists. And she's not that impressed with the covers. She wants to know how to decide which cover to use. She's torn between two of them. There's a white cover with Change Your Mind with rainbow colors, and then also the red-purple cover with white lettering. Any suggestions? Well, Wendy, I'm going to start by saying I will take a look at your covers, and I will do so right now, and I'm happy to give you my opinion. But when you say that you're not impressed with the best-selling covers, my response to that would be, we don't have to be impressed.
Exactly.
I don't like most of the covers that are coming out now. I really don't. But it's not my taste that matters. What matters is what the readers want and what the buyers want. So here's my advice to you. Guys, I'm going to tell you that Wendy has sent me her covers. I took a look at them. I like them. I like them a lot. And they do definitely reflect modern covers. But Wendy, if you can't decide between the white and the color, at this point, it is no longer your choice. I'm looking at both the covers now. These are both professionally designed. They look really good. I'm very, very happy with both of these covers. And if you're trying to decide between the two, or if any of you are trying to decide about covers, these are the steps I would suggest you take. Step one, Stay out of it. Step 1 is for you to remove yourself from the cover discussion altogether. Step 2, find someone you are not related to who loves you but does not give two hoots about your book. We all have tons of people. Trust me, most of my friends could care less about my book. Step 1 is remove yourself from the decision. Step 2 is find someone who loves you but does not care about your book product at all. You guys with me? Can you all think of someone? All right. I'm thinking of my friend Roseanne. She loves me. She could care less about my book. Step 3, give the covers to your version of Roseanne, to that person. And give them a list of places to go with full color, 5.5 by 8.5. Don't cheap out. Go get a nice glossy, go to your local printer, your local FedEx, Kinko's, and print off a 5.5 by 8.5 version of both covers. Trim them down. Get them to trim them down, hand them over to your person who loves you but does not love your book. And send them into bookstores, libraries, send them into places where the people who see thousands of books a day are working. And ask them, not you, you are not allowed to ask. I'll tell you why in a moment. Ask them to bring the books, the 2 covers, or even 3, to the industry, and have the experts in the industry, the people who are on the front lines every day, give their feedback. Have them write this feedback down. Do not let them just remember it, because they won't remember right. If you can actually get the bookstore employee to agree to be recorded on their iPhone, even better. And tons of people want to be asked their opinion. I don't know what step we're on. Step 5, don't do this at 10:30 on a Saturday morning. The book buyer does not have time for you. Do it, have the person do it at 10:30 on a Tuesday morning. Be smart about when you're asking. But step 1 is you don't get to, and once you've got a couple of good books, if you're really agonizing, Wendy, it's not your call anymore. And you can't ask the industry their opinion. Let me tell you why. Because if you're standing there, even on email, asking people's opinion, they're not going to give you their honest opinion. Even Wendy, I'm even nervous to give you my honest opinion because I've known you for a while and now I really like you and I don't want to hurt your feelings. I have an opinion on which cover you should use, but now I'm a little nervous to tell you because what if you really like the pink and purple one and I prefer the white one? But let me explain to you why my opinion about the white one means nothing. I'm not on the front lines. Yes, I'm a book publishing industry, but I'm not seeing thousands of books a day the way librarians and booksellers are. I don't know what's coming out from Random House 9 months from now, but those book employees do because they're seeing catalogs that are coming out for books coming out 9 months from now. They're the ones you need to ask. I don't even decide on my own cover. I absolutely don't. Daniel, show them the best-selling author cover behind you. It's right behind you. Do you guys see that right behind Daniel, the best-selling author? This is not my idea of my favorite cover. I don't like orange. There's no way. Daniel and I put this book out, but under no circumstances would this be the cover that I designed. However, this is the cover that the librarians and the booksellers loved the most because they knew that orange was hot. Thanks, Daniel. They knew that orange was hot. They knew that white on big blocky letters. That's not my personal style. Everything I own is gray or black. That's who I am. I have zero color in my life. So Wendy, just because I prefer the white cover, that's my personal taste. You need to go ask people. Do not ever depend on your friends, your publishers, your editors. You only, in my opinion, when you get down to the final 2, you only ask booksellers. And I'm going to shut up now because Daniel may have something to say. He may not. I don't know.
No, I think I agree wholeheartedly with all of that.
But I like the white one. But I don't get a vote. And Wendy, if you really want to get other people's opinions, send somebody in who doesn't care to ask them. Linda's asking how to come up with cover design choices in the first place. Good morning, Linda. How are you? Daniel, you remember Linda and Rick Lenz. They were Bestseller Builders clients. They're on the call today.
Hello, Linda.
The way I get started with cover concepts, and we did this with you, is I start by coming up with a list of a half a dozen or so authors that my current potential readership is already reading. I see what people already like, and it's easy to do that because I see what's selling. I grab those covers and then I find out who the authors are and who their publishers are. And then I go to Amazon.com. And if you look down the left-hand side, you can actually sort books coming out by major publishers that are coming out 90 days from now. You can actually sort books by release date and start seeing the covers of books that HarperCollins is putting out, and Random House and Simon & Schuster and St. Martin. And yes, I know a lot of those are now the same company. But the fact is that I start by going to the major houses. I see what they're coming out with in the next few months. It's easy to find that online. You can go to their website and look at their spring catalogs right now. Heck, in 2 months, you're going to be able to look at their fall catalog. See what they're doing. Come up with a couple of concepts that you think would fit your book and your publishing program. Give those books, those concepts to a professional cover designer and tell them to emulate, not copy, but to emulate that cover and see what they come up with. So that's the short version. That is, I mean, when I do a cover concept proposal and meeting for my clients, it takes me a couple of hours. I just gave you the overview. It's quite a bit of work, but those are the steps. All right. Sonia has more questions on covers, and Sonia, I'm going to get to that, but I've got a couple of questions. If you don't mind, Stephen and Sonia, I'm going to answer one or two more that were emailed to me this week. Actually, one of them was about how to launch a YouTube channel, and we just covered that. It was all about video, and Daniel, I want you guys to go to that link that he left, the danielhallwebinars.com/YTdigital. It's a great way to get started. Daniel, I'm curious, somebody is asking if podcasts are worth it. We've got a woman, her name is Adriana, and she wrote in the week before Christmas, and I missed the question. So Adriana, if you're listening, I'm sorry. But you had said that the only podcasts that were willing to book you weren't very popular. They weren't the big ones. They were the only little ones, and you didn't know if they were worth your time. And I'd love to find out from Daniel, because I know you do a lot with podcasts. Now, one of your podcasts is a top 50 business podcast on Apple's iTunes. I mean, Daniel's podcast is actually quite well regarded. But what is your opinion about podcasts that aren't as well regarded, and are they worth it?
So let's sort of more clearly define the question, because I kind of hear both things here. For the first question that I kind of heard in there is, should I start my own podcast? And is that worth it? Second sort of question I heard in there is, should I go on other people's podcast? Is that worth it? So those are two different questions. And let's talk about that for just a second. The one thing that you and I talked about in this book right here, The Best-Selling Author, is, and I think it's the very first chapter or the second chapter in the book, is when you have something that you want to communicate or sell in the marketplace, that the best thing to do, it's basically what I just described to Stephen, is to find already congregated, already put together audiences that may be interested in what you're doing, and co-opt them to the extent you possibly can. Okay, so there are various ways to do that. There's a YouTube channels you could do that with, or there's podcasts, there's blogs, there's major media, on and on and on and on. There's just a lot of ways to do that. Podcast is a way to do that. So in other words, there are podcasts that have a audience, and the great thing about that, and the great thing about podcast in general, is that for the most part, people listen to podcasts that have a very specific interest. Let's say African violets. There are probably podcasts on growing champion prize-winning African violets, or winter gardening, or dog training Doberman pinschers. In other words, with podcast, you can get very, very specific and very, very niched, and there are podcasts related to those subject matters. Now, let's take, for example, winter gardening. And there's podcast about winter gardening. The really cool thing is that if you've got a product, a book, a course, a coaching program, specifically that market may be interested in, although that podcast may not have a lot of listeners, the listeners that they do have are rabid, right? They're really, really super interested in winter gardening. Okay, so the lens to look at this through is there a podcast, for example, related to this subject matter? Or, by the way, and it may not be like, if you're into winter gardening, maybe you've got a book or a course on winter gardening, then there may not be a lot of podcasts on winter gardening, but there's a lot of podcasts on gardening, and there's more podcasts on perennial gardening, and et cetera, that you might be a good guest on. And there's going to be a portion of that audience that's going to be interested in whatever it is you have to say, right? Whatever your message is for that audience. So whereas the audience may not be very wide, it is very, very deep, okay? Now, the reason why this is important is because everyone today, or just about everyone today, can get in their car, because most cars being manufactured today have internet-enabled radio. So in other words, people can get in their car and they could download their favorite podcast and whatever the subject matter is. So and this, by the way, is basically replacing terrestrial radio more and more and more, because people can pull feeds down for exactly the content that they want to listen to. Okay, whether that be gardening or dog training or whatever it happens to be, that they're really passionate about that. And because of the ease of access of podcast, you can get them on, as I say, in your car, which, by the way, that's where a lot of podcasts are consumed, because, drive time, you could do two things at once. It's a wonderful thing. But it's not just there. There are places like the Alexa from Google. There's Spotify. You can get it on, of course, all of your devices. So the sort of the thesis here is that if you want to build an audience, that's cool, but think about it from the standpoint of you being a guest and you starting your own podcast. So far, we've been talking about you just being a guest, and I think that's a wonderful idea, as long as, number one, you are adding just massive amounts of value, okay? And you've got something free to give away so that you can cleave off. You could attract people that are listening either now or in the future to come and get your freebie, okay? Whatever that happens to be. Because again, what do we say in the book? We say, find an audience that's interested in whatever it is that you've got and co-opt that audience to the extent you possibly can. This is an example of doing precisely that. Okay, so you do that. You get better. You start on small podcasts, because I'll tell you, here's another big factor that I sort of heard in that question. Oh, I'm not interested in going on these smaller podcasts because it's not worth my time. Well, let me just tell you something. You probably can get on larger podcasts, but because you have not honed your message and gotten really, really good at delivering your message, you blow the opportunity. So it is far better to start off maybe doing a dozen or so smaller shows and getting comfortable with the process, getting comfortable with dialing in your message and the ability to to relate that you've got something free for them and invite people to do that and get really comfortable with that, and then parlay one success into another bigger show, and so forth and so on, until, yes, by the time you hit the big leagues, you're ready for it. You're ready to maximize those opportunities. You get it? Okay. So that's sort of my diatribe, if you will, my soapbox on being a guest on shows. Great idea, but do so with intent of getting better and also building an audience by giving something away free. The other side of that coin, you want me to keep going here, Amy?
I would love it.
Okay.
I'm agreeing with everything.
Okay, so the other side of that coin is building your own audience with a podcast. Also a great thing to do. But I will also tell you this, because I have the realfastresults.com podcast. If you've not checked it out, you should definitely check it out, because it's really basically meant and designed to help people exactly like you in the author-publisher community. At any rate, the thing that I learned about podcast and getting additional listeners and subscribers to my podcast is, and this is a really, really important point, and it goes back to the first point I made, podcast listeners listen to other podcasts, okay? Right? So if you are doing other podcasts, if you are appearing as a guest on other podcasts, you might say, along with your other freebie, hey, check out my podcast, the realfastresults.com podcast, because that's where I go into more detail about, whatever it is you're talking about, right? So keep that in mind. The best way to build a podcast audience is by appearing on other people's podcasts, all right? Because podcast listeners listen to podcasts, right? Okay, so the next sort of step in that process in building a podcast platform is always be very, very focused, at least from my standpoint, at delivering value of some kind. Now, I'm a trainer, you might be able to tell. I'm not an entertainer, although I try to get better at that. That is really not my swim lane. I like to to train and to give folks the steps. But whatever it is that you are good at, because I know that that's sort of my giftedness, not being an entertainer, but being a trainer. But lean into whatever your giftedness is. So if you're funny, if you're good at entertaining, like Amy is just no one better. Amy is a rock star at both of those things, at training and being really funny and engaging and charming. And if that is who you are, then you lean into that. You lean into that part of your personality as you build your podcast. And by the way, there are a number of different ways to do this. The easiest, let me just give you the easiest, and again, we cover it in the best-selling author. It's called Anchor.fm. You could actually start and record your entire podcast on your device, your iPhone, your Android, because there's an app called Anchor.fm that you can get and record the whole thing right from there and even have guests on. So, is there anything else I wanted to say about that? Did you have any follow-up questions on that, Amy or Sonia?
I don't see any, but I thought that they were, Sonia, that's actually was emailed in.
Okay. Okay, great. So if you have any follow-up questions, that's all I can think of to say on that at the moment.
Sounds terrific. And it was a wonderful answer. Daniel, Stephan, who is one of our loyal and most favorite visitors here to Free Advice Friday, has quite a bit of questions on a regular about marketing and branding and some of the things that you're into. You have you've got a membership program, a very inexpensive membership program, super cheap, if I remember correctly, where you actually offer tons of content specifically on branding and marketing and a number of other business elements. Can you tell us what that is real quick?
Sure. So I do basically a weekly training with coaching. It's called realfastvip.com. And it is, I think we have a $1 trial for 7 days, and then it's $30 a month thereafter. So it's basically $1 a day. By the way, that's a marketing thing, right? It's easy to say, and it's easy to communicate, and it's an easy yes for most people. So we have a fairly big community where I will train and coach every single week. Plus, all members have the opportunity to consult with me one-on-one, 30 minutes every single month. In addition to that, I have something called the Winning Writers Interview Series, because it's not just about giving training, because training is great. There's a lot of it, but what I strive to do with my VIP people is to actually help them create marketing assets that they could use to actually sell things, to sell their books. So one of the things that I do is I occasionally I have a series called the Winning Writers Interview Series, where I actually get on and I interview my authors, and then we syndicate those shows out to other folks, and then people can pull them down, and they could re-syndicate it, put it on their social media, they put it up on their YouTube channel, etc. And then in addition to all of that, I own a channel on Roku, which is growing by leaps and bounds, by the way, called Book Lovers TV, where all of my members have, they're eligible to actually put their book trailers, and that's actually some of the most watched parts of Book Lovers TV. So if you haven't downloaded that, if you have a Roku set, a Roku device, go check out Book Lovers TV, and you can see what I'm talking about. But at any rate, all of that for $30 a month, it's like a no-brainer if you're truly serious. So thank you for letting me say all that.
Well, no, that's what I wanted. In particular, Stephan has got, and not only Stephan, but also there's a couple of authors that we have. We've got Mary Pittman, who comes in. I know she'll be listening on a replay with her book about finding money. I think it'd be a great fit. Guys, Daniel does have his own training that he has to do in a few minutes, so we're going to let him go, but we're going to finish up Free Advice Friday with one final question. It's a quick one. Sonia had a follow-up question about covers and about when you do bulk sales. Is there a different formula for cover concepts? Yes. Sonia, I do lots of corporate sales and lots of bulk sales, and the formula is this: you don't do anything. You wait and you sell the concept, you sell the content, and when JCPenney or Morgan Stanley or Real Fast VIP, or when someone agrees to buy 200 or 300 copies of your book, you work with them on the cover that includes their branding, their color, where you do a joint branded thing, but you don't spend a lot of time worrying about the cover until you get the sale. Because 9 times out of 10, they're going to want to say in what the cover, they're going to want the cover to reflect their branding. And you've just wasted a bunch of time and money on your own cover concepts before you because they're going to want to participate, especially if they're going to buy a couple thousand copies. So Sonia, that's my advice on that. Linda is saying that, Daniel, that she bought your book, The Best-Selling Author. Linda, I know you're reading it because you sent me that picture of where you were reading it from. I laughed so hard, I hurt myself.
Thank you, Linda.
So guys, this has been another Free Advice Friday. Daniel has given us an entire hour of his very valuable time, and I appreciate that, Daniel. Thank you for coming on.
I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
For those of you who are watching this on a replay at youtube.com/Amy Collins, or who are watching this on a replay at amysadvice.com, I would recommend that you go to amysadvice.com, click the big red button, and join us live every Friday. Ask your questions. Email us at amy@amysadvice.com. Email us and get your questions in. Join us live on Fridays. Send us your questions in if you're watching this on a replay, and we will see you next Friday on Free Advice Friday. Thanks so much.